Had a few friends struggle with their art, and I would love to help them. So I was like, how about instead of telling each individual one of them some tips, one by one, I just make a YouTube video to go through some beginner's art tips, especially for digital art, so I can help everyone. If you're here, it means that you want to learn how to master digital art, and I'm here to help you as someone that still hasn't properly mastered it. I mentioned in another one of my videos before that you should not expect any extremely detailed tutorial on how to approach stuff like anatomy and backgrounds from me, which would also make me not the most suitable teacher in general, but I can still hand out some helpful tips that would have helped me way more when I first started approaching digital art. Let's start with something simple. What drawing device should you start with? Which I feel like right now there's so many options to pick from. For example, if you have an iPad with an Apple Pencil, you're pretty much already set. All you need after that is an art program you're comfortable with. About that, I will highly recommend Procreate. I have some experience on it and I can very much say it's perfect to start up. It has very simple and understandable interface, and I'm fairly confident in the fact that there's so many useful tutorials out there on how to use the app that you're 100% gonna get comfortable with it pretty much immediately. If you prefer a free option, I've heard great things about Ibis Paint X. I haven't personally tried it myself, but I've seen enough good things about it to recommend it. Honestly, it really doesn't matter what iPad model you have. It can be a 2000 euros iPad, or it can just be the used iPad your older sibling gifted you after they got a new one. Trust me, it really doesn't matter as long as you can draw. Also, I would like to take a few seconds to once again cry over the death of my own iPad. Moving on, if you're someone that doesn't own an iPad and would like to start drawing on their laptop, I'm gonna recommend a graphic tablet without a screen to start off. It might be very uncomfortable at first since you're gonna have to get used to not looking where you're drawing. But trust me, once you master that, any other tablet is gonna be light work. If you don't want to start with that or you're ready to change from the previous option, remember that there's no need to spend thousands of euro or any currency you use in your country to get your hands on a good screen graphic tablet. I have an XP Pen Artist 12. It's very affordable, and especially it already offers me everything I need to work. Another thing that I would like to add is size doesn't make your art better. So yeah, opt for a smaller graphic tablet as your first, and once you're confident enough that you can change, go crazy. Okay, now we have gotten over the device subject, let's move to programs. This might not be exactly what you're looking for. Maybe you pressed on the video because you want an actual art tips, but trust me, this is important stuff. We're gonna get to the art tips too. For programs, I'm gonna mainly go through a few options for PC artists since I already went through the ones for iPad. If you're going for free programs, Krita, Fire Alpaca, and Medibank are great options. I've heard that Ibis Paint also has a PC version, but unless they changed it, it has a lot of limitations, so I wouldn't recommend that one. If you're going for more professional programs, I will not, and hear me out, not recommend Photoshop to start with. It's a pretty complex program to understand, with a very confusing interface to look at as someone that just started digital art. Everything is just everywhere. I will recommend Clip Studio Paint instead, and it's absolutely not because I'm biased. But in general, even if at the start it can be confusing, it has some easily accessible features that are just amazing. Like the possibility to use 3D models, the launcher shop with all the downloadable assets, and the features that make comic creation so much easier and faster. I might actually be biased, but trust me, it's for a good reason. Now let's actually get to art tips. Tip number 1. Brushes help. Brushes are the fundamentals of your art process, so it's obvious that they're incredibly important. I see many artists say that the brush doesn't make the artist, but it's also true that a brush that an artist you like uses might not be suitable for you. I see people do amazing stuff with the default G Pen on Clip Studio, but personally I wouldn't recommend using that. The pressure of the pen can be very uncomfortable to deal with, and when someone is new to digital art, they're not gonna enjoy the feel of it. I myself don't like the pen even if I've been drawing digitally for over 6 years. Instead, try playing around with a brush that doesn't have an intense pen pressure, and if you're already confident on your strokes, maybe go for a textured brush. Believe it or not, textured brushes are lifesavers. Same goes for render brushes. Beginner artists always tend to use airbrush for shading, but please avoid doing that. Instead, try going with a harder type of brush that is easy to blend and makes it simple to play with the opacity. I always recommend having at least one brush for your sketch or line work and one for your rendering. Tip number 2. Tracing and using references is okay, of course, if done the right way. The best way of utilizing these methods in your art process is to not directly trace your reference, but rather study the structures of them. them. For example, the best way to use the trace method is to take a reference and try to break it down in geometrical shapes to properly understand the structure of whatever you're trying to study. Doesn't matter if it's anatomy, background, or anything else. Remember to never trace an art piece made by someone else and post it on social media or even show it to your friends saying it's your own. That's exactly the wrong way of approaching tracing and why most people are upset about this method. For references, the trace method can be used, but it can also consist in grabbing a picture and just try to copy what's going on in it while leaving it on the side, which is also another amazing way to speed up your drawing process. I see many people going on with studying how anatomy actually works and learning each individual muscle, but as a lazy artist, I'm gonna teach you the way of the laziness. Mainly focus on one of the methods I mentioned before, and with time, you will be able to eyeball things. It's true that having knowledge of anatomic structure is extremely helpful, so feel free to do your research as I do that myself too sometimes. Just most of the time, I'm really not in the place to talk when it comes to actually studying. Also remember, refrain from studying AI art as it's filled with imperfection that could affect your art. I think it's pretty obvious that AI art should never be used by beginners to study art, but I still feel like mentioning it. If you've made it this far, please consider leaving a like and maybe subscribing to my channel. It will really help me out. Tip number 3. Try to keep your sketch as clean as possible or make multiple sketch stages. If you're someone that has really dirty sketches but still manages to come up with something amazing, I'm jealous. If you're a beginner though, try to keep your sketches as understandable as possible, as it will help you more once you're doing your line art or when you're rendering. If you really can't, I recommend doing a sketch above your sketch. My process is often made by a structure sketch that can be a bit dirtier, a cleaner sketch on top, and then the final line art. Tip number 4. Nothing is original. Every art style you see online is inspired by another one. Your favorite artist is likely trying to have a similar art style to their own favorite artist. See others as your role model. If you like how an artist draws mouths, study how they do it. If you like how another one draws eyes, study that too. And that applies to anything that you see from other artists online, like hair, noses, hands, and so on. It, even study your favorite historical painters if you like. Just again, remember to never trace an artist piece with the excuse of studying their art style just to end up calling it your own. Tip number 5. Pick your colors right. I feel like coloring is such a big subject that can hardly be summarized in a few phrases. This brings in stuff like color theory and whatever other study that derivates from it, but remember these 3 things. Saturation, contrast, and layer modes. Saturation is when your drawing is either too vibrant or too muddy. It always depends on what piece you're working on, but it's always better to have an in-between. So try to make your vibrant colors less vibrant and your muddy colors less muddy. I know it's a very kindergarten-like explanation, but trust me, it really helps out. Of course, there's a situation in which the light completely changes the colors you're working on, but that's another story. Contrast is when, for example, in a piece, there is a strong change in value between what's in front and what's behind. Usually when a subject is the main focus, it will tend to have stronger colors to attract the viewer's attention. So by that logic, what's in the background will tend to be more foggy. See it as if what's in the background tends to disappear from our view. Let's take a picture of an environment, for example. See how the stuff in the distance tends to be lighter? That's exactly what contrast is about. The stronger colors of the subject in the foreground attract you to focus on it, while it distracts you from the background. And last but not least, layer modes. Again, you might hear artists tell you not to abuse a specific mode, which is multiply, but as someone who has been enjoying painting a lot, multiply is a true lifesaver. The only thing that makes this layer mode bad is the use of gray and black. If you use these colors, your art is gonna look very dull. Your characters are gonna look not so alive. So instead, try using a lighter version of the color you used as base, keeping yourself to the left part of your coloring wheel. This method is going to help you giving a more colorful vibe to your art and enhance it more. All layer modes are amazing and helpful, but of course, it's always better not to use them for every small detail. Getting used to color without them can be helpful to expand your mental library. Tip number 6. Stop focusing on small details. When people look at your art, they will often spend about 5 seconds looking at it. So don't spend too much on one specific thing because others will likely not see it. Try instead to work on your piece while staying zoomed out. That way, you will see the bigger picture and will notice how some pieces look complete without actually being complete. This tip helps out with finishing your pieces faster and overall being more effective. I know that there's so much more to talk about and it's just so much that it can be put into one video. Art is complex and cannot be learned in just a few days, months, or even years. But I feel like these are some of the most important things when it comes to starting digital art. I know my explanation might not be the best, but I really hope I was somewhat helpful and easy to follow. Thank you so much for passing by. Hope I'll see you again. Bye bye!